It was brought to my attention at the weekend that I start every single one of these videos in exactly the same way. And, well, it's difficult to do it any other way, I suppose. But I'm going to start this one by saying this, just to mix it up a little bit, and then continue in how I would have done it in the first place. Which is to say that this is the book of Proverbs today, and we're doing Proverbs 1 to 5. I thought this was going to be a lot like Psalms, but actually it's a lot more interesting. Can I say that? I know a lot of people are very fond of the Psalms in that sort of poetic sort of thing. The Proverbs, however, seem to be a lot more practical and basically the idea to convey wisdom and how to live, that sort of idea. I gather there's 31 of these things, so they're quite often used for daily devotionals, or one for each day of the month. Seems like an interesting idea. They're quite dense with stuff as well. And you read when there's quite a lot of stuff to pull out and interesting ideas. It looks, certainly these first few, it looks like written by Solomon, as in he was supposed to be super wise. That was his superpower, as it were. And it sounds like it's directed to his son or his sons. So he's passing on some sort of fatherly wisdom. And yeah, we'll take it from there. It starts off by talking about who these proverbs are for and who they're meant to help. And it includes for giving prudence to those who are simple. I don't know why that amused me, but it seems like a modern term, I guess. But there is then a footnote that defines what it means by simple, talking about being gullible, lacking moral direction, inclined to evil. And gullible feels like it's offset from the rest of those. It's like, these things are not all like each other. But I guess that could be an interesting idea of gullible in terms of the devil. So you gullible, that little voice in your ear telling you, oh, go and do this. Maybe, don't know. Then it's also gone close to what we've come across before several times, but the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. I've come across that a few times, but it's expressed as the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I don't know if that matters. I probably should have looked it up in my big Hebrew thing to see if it's actually the same word, just translated differently. But it's, yeah. Anyway, we then get on to our first bit of actual practical advice, but it's don't mug people. So, yeah, I mean, it's a low bar, but I guess you've got to establish the basics. It does also say that actually it makes the point that if you do mug people or do anything wicked generally, you only hurt yourself. I've never been mugged, but I'm pretty sure it does hurt, or some of it will certainly hurt in one way or another. A violation, if nothing else, even if there's no physical injury. So, yeah, I guess that's referring to it in the spiritual sort of plane, as it were, rather than actually on a practical, physical way. Again, this came from Solomon, who's like super guy, very wise. He talks about, if you ignore my advice, I will laugh when disaster strikes you. Yeah, I mean, that's not very love your neighbour as yourself, is it? Or at least, I suppose C.S. Lewis helped define for us what love your neighbour meant. And it wasn't anything too lovey-dovey or anything, but basically wish them well. I'm pretty sure that does not extend to laughing in their face when the fortune befalls them because they did something bad. But, that was a theme all through the Psalms as well, actually, was it? People wishing retribution on people. It's like, we've got a funny idea of this love your neighbour, and it just seems to have gone in one ear out the other, or means something very different to what I think it does. Solomon then says, whoever listens to me will live in safety and be at ease without fear of harm. Yeah, I'm not sure that's true. Maybe in some big spiritual, otherworldly kind of way, but I don't know. I mean, I guess there's some comfort for people in believing in God, but it doesn't mean it's going to keep them from harm. I guess it's maybe not harm in the day-to-day sense. Like you might still stub your toe or something, but at least you're not going to die burning in flames or something like that. In chapter or Proverb 2, I don't know whether is that Proverb number 2 or is it chapter 2? Don't know. We're going to figure that out as we go. It talks about if you look for knowledge of God, then you will find it, which is really interesting because it implies that on this great journey I'm on, coming up for 2 years studying this stuff now, I can't help but find him if I'm doing it. Well, if I'm sincerely searching, I guess, is perhaps implied in that. But there are plenty of people who've read the Bible lots and don't believe it's true. So, yeah, I don't quite know how that's supposed to work. There must be an open-minded sort of element to that, but then someone like Alex O'Connor seems very open-minded and reads that and doesn't reach that conclusion. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting idea though. Same verse, chapter / proverb. There's talk of the upright will live in the land and the wicked will be cut off from the land, which doesn't happen. So I don't know if does that allude to an afterlife, a sort of thing, a cut off from the land being, well, sort of heaven to some extent. I think this is something that shifted in my own thinking, because I was certainly part of what I gather is referred to as the Platonic idea of heaven, in that when we die, some sort of wispy spirit comes out and goes off into the sky and it's all happy. And apparently that came from Plato. That's got nothing to do with the Bible. And what the Bible actually says is that we're going to be physically resurrected. So it's a physical afterlife. And I guess that would then make sense in the context of a physical afterlife, being cut off from the land or being in the land. Don't know. Proverb number 3 talks about if you keep the commands, it will prolong your life and you'll have peace and prosperity. That's an interesting idea, that, isn't it? In the sense that if you really believe this stuff is true, then this is kind of like a waiting room for the proper bit. So it's not obvious that you'd necessarily want to prolong your life. I don't know how it works. When my father was dying, certainly his prayer to God was to be healed if that was God's will, and did state that he did want to not die. So that was a man who very much believed what he was doing. Open to the possibility he was wrong. He did acknowledge that in his journal. But that was a lot of faith, and yet still didn't want to die. So, if you're given a choice, I suppose. So it is interesting, that idea, isn't it? Because, theoretically, anyone who is a Christian should want to die, because the next bit's better. So, might have to do a tangent on that. Excuse me. But yeah, I find that a very interesting idea. It does also tell you just to be nice to people. If someone needs some help them out. Okay. It's nice and practical, simple, easy to remember. There's Proverb number 4 talks about the bread of wickedness and the wine of, I can't remember writing, the wine of violence. And again, this is the idea, we've got these echoes of, reverse echoes, I suppose, of communion, when you go and have the bread and the wine and you celebrate it as being the body and blood of Jesus. That was clearly not a new idea, the combination of bread and wine. But then back in those days, I'm sure they didn't have Twixes, Hula Hoops and Kellogg's Frosties, so less options. Bread and wine, and I guess there's fish and there's meat, and that's probably it. I don't know, but definitely not Frosties. Although, I guess Frosties are technically, it could be the Frosties of wickedness, couldn't they? I can only have them at Christmas because they are too wicked. And then finally, Proverb number 5 is a specific warning against adultery. But there's a really interesting sort of wish you can pass on to someone. I say, may her breasts satisfy you always. So you can imagine that in conversation, someone coming up to you and say, great, yeah, thanks. It's brilliant. I guess of its time and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think me and Proverbs are going to get on. So far, so good. So next week we're going to look at a few more.